Hello, this is Through a Therapist's Eyes, where you get to get personal insights directly from a therapist in personal time in your car and at home. Today, we do not have the panel. We have the month in review from all of the January shows that we have done. We have the man behind the curtain in front of us, Mr. Neil Robinson. How are you, man?
Oh, I made it today.
You did.
So,
And this is Mr. Adam Cloninger hanging out with us this month once again. Have you had a good month?
Yes.
Okay. You having a good day?
Yeah. I'm all right. I'm a grumpy old man today. But yeah, I'm all right.
Care to explain the grumpy old man, or is there?
I'm old and grumpy.
You're only grumpy. Oh, gotcha. So listen, we are switching to YouTube Live, and we have been talking a little bit about it. We have an actual, not date, but episode show, so that's going to be firing up on episode 220. It's just like the Facebook Lives that we've begun to enjoy, interacting with you live while we're actually doing the recordings. So if you'll go to Through a Therapist's Eyes on the YouTube channel that we got, click subscribe, hit the YouTube button or the blue bell button, and that'll do the alerts. But I realized last show, Neil, that you were supposed to do that when you had the mic, and I just stepped on your toes. That I didn't do a good enough job. Do you want to tell them how to go to YouTube?
you did a lot better job. You're actually getting better with it.
Am I getting better?
Yeah, from the YouTube channel, you just hit the subscribe, like our videos, and hit the bell so you get notified when we go live.
Episode 220.
220.
All right. Listen, Apple iTunes gives you an opportunity to leave reviews and 5 stars. They all really help us. Please understand the power of what it is that is for our industry. Our show really gets found that way. You can be a big part of helping us grow this year, so really do appreciate that. And contact it Through a Therapist's Eyes is the website. Email address to get us. This is the human emotional experience, and we do endeavor to figure this out together. The panel in review for January 2023. I'm not talking about the book. I don't want to talk about the book.
You have to mention the book.
I have to mention the book?
You have to mention the book.
Re-understanding emotions and becoming your best self.
You have to mention the book.
Yes.
It's not upside down, is it? Okay.
It's not upside down. Actually, I'm excited about the second one.
Yep.
The marriage book coming out that I'm popping through. I'm going to start picking up steam on that
And
one.
if you've read the book, go to Amazon, 5-star review.
Ah, yes.
That's going to get a lot of traction for when the next book is out. So if you've read it, review it, give 5 stars if you think it's worth it.
Really, it helps us, guys. It helps me as an author. It helps us as a show, the Through a Therapist's Eyes. Again, I have learned over the last year or two, having been doing this with the book and all, that really is a big part. So, yeah, reviews are very helpful on Amazon, and then for the podcast on Apple iTunes and all this kind of stuff. So we have started a game that we like to sort of play, and I think it's fun, kind of cool. Mr. Cloninger over there pays attention to mental health in the news, and he kind of scans the world, I guess, for us, and he gives Neil and I a choice of one or number 2 topic to kind of kick around that is a mental health related thing in the news. And all he gives us is one word. And if you're on the YouTube Live soon and the Facebook Live, you could pop in a vote as well. Maybe we could start doing that, Neil, right?
That'd be fun.
Yeah. And so we have to choose which one we go on to. So, Adam, what 2 words is that? Did I set that up right?
Yeah, you set it perfectly. Now, this one this week is probably way too easy, and I know which one of the 2 y'all are going to choose.
I have my head buried under the sand, keeping working. So a lot of times I miss
I'm pretty sure. There's been some things in the news here in the last week that's been just bombarding us and just hitting us in the head with. So I really know y'all are going to know what 2 topics are, and I think I know which one of the 2 you're going to pick. So, documents.
Oh, come on! Yeah, that
or
one
tanks.
Is so easy. Those are both so easy.
I know. I said that they're really easy.
What do you think, Neil?
Well, I actually don't know about the tanks.
You don't know
that
about
one?
the
I don't know. I know about the documents, but I don't know about the tanks.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, is it? I don't know the rules to this game so far yet. We've only done it twice. So, am I allowed to tell him? Can we converse about the choices?
Sure, why not?
Is that okay?
Just
okay. Yeah, the tanks are the Ukraine war. He's been dialed into the Ukraine war, and by the way, I'm going to see the way you pick out news items too, and the way that you think. That's going to start becoming clearer. But yeah, we finally gave our beautiful big destructive Abrams tanks. Is that what it's called? Anyway, we're supporting Ukraine and the war efforts, and the topic in the news with mental health is really all kinds of traumatic realities and stuff that goes on with war. So our choices are all the crazy document stuff,
which got even more interesting
today as well. Jeez, it keeps on pouring. So I don't know. What do you think, man?
I'm going to go with the documents on this one because the documents really gives, I think, multiple perspectives.
Okay, so I figured y'all would
What
say
do you
tanks,
What do you
but
think?
we'll go
I mean, what are you leaning towards?
I was actually leaning towards documents as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I was actually leaning that way.
So the newest thing I wanted to mention to y'all is about I'm going to just kind of glance over this so I can make sure I say it right. So the National Archives has asked representatives of the last 6 presidents and vice presidents to double check to make sure they don't have any confidential or top secret documents.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And again, the reason I say as far as mental health, people read this and it bothers them. They see this thing, they're thinking, oh my God, is our government doing this or whatever? And I'm curious, what kind of aspects do you think that it can cause people as far as being stressed out about something like this?
It's something. Yeah, I like to talk about social media, and actually, I don't know that I want to say that I like to talk about it. I like to think about it because I really think we need a lot of thought about this phenomenon that we've got going on in the way that we consume news and what has happened. And I've said this on the show a few times, in that I really believe since 9/11 experience, it changed in a fundamental way the way that we are inundated with coverage on a particular topic that we can't get off of. And we're finding a very, very real and a very, very significant connection and correlation is the better word to anxiety. So I see your point with the mental health piece of it. I mean, we go on a political aspect of it and talk about our views of it, but it is more of like, I agree with you, the mental health aspects of all of this I've thought a lot about in the last few years. What are you thinking, Neil?
I think it's very interesting because of the shift in the perspective. There's been a lot of stuff like when you look at all this started with the raid on Trump, which was one side. There was always the Democrats going after Trump because blah, 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 blah. And then you have now Biden, who's a Democrat, current president, has documents from when he was a vice president, which goes back to the whole...
when he was a senator, too.
Oh, yeah, because they've gone further back.
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting to see Trump, acting president, who has the ability to declassify documents, my understanding, and I could be wrong, and the way that was handled. Well, now it goes back, okay, Biden's done it before he was president, which means he shouldn't have the rights to do it.
Correct.
Which is interesting. And I think what I think is interesting to find about the last 6 presidents, the naivety of thinking that a president or someone with power wouldn't have these types of documents, like just because of human. How many times do we take stuff home for work and stuff like that? But yet to villainize someone is kind of interesting and then see it on the other foot. It's just, I like to see this juxtaposition of like one
last
side.
6. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I think the reason why that was the case is because it was found that Mike Pence also had
Mike Pence
of top secret nature, which is, I mean, I don't know any of these people personally, but I mean, this guy seems to be really squeaky clean in a lot of ways, right? Like, it is interesting, but again, I want to steer us away from the political aspect.
And I
it.
wasn't trying to go that into at all.
Yeah, because it's more like you're right, and that's the way you presented it. People are panicked about this, and I am as well. I will come clean. I mean, it sounds absolutely astonishing to me that in our states, I know around the world, you likely have various agencies in your country, just like ours, that has all kinds of protocols and things that are important to your national security. That's the buzzword that we use in the States a lot. I'm sure that that's the same around the world. To have these types of things seems very anxiety-provoking to me. Like, that's not okay in any regard for Trump to do that. And then to have Biden, like, it's like, wow. And then to have Pence do that, it's kind of like, wow.
How long has this been going on? That normal thing has been going on forever.
And are we literally going to find this from every president? And maybe it's, as you say, Neil, not a big deal. Maybe these are, but they're top secret. So
I think that's the one thing you have to look at is what makes them classified. Are these really national security risk, or was this something that is just not for people outside of the Oval Office or outside of that group? That's the question.
It said classified and top secret is how they say
yeah,
it.
These are pretty sensitive.
But the question is when were they done? Is it even applicable nowadays? Because it could have been something that the mission's over with. It doesn't matter. Things do become declassified over time.
Right.
They're redacted. So the question is, are these documents that are a major risk? The reality of, are they or are they not? And then also the fact, like, what chain of command got skipped in this whole thing to where someone could just put it in their garage.
Let me jump to you
at their
though,
office.
because I'm not worried about, for our show, Through a Therapist's Eyes, the dynamics there. We don't know, right? And that's
anxiety.
That's the anxiety piece. These are the questions that come up. And we've had news media, that's a part of what happens in the free world, which is really
right
valuable. It's invaluable. It's a super invaluable part of, how we as citizenry, monitor and watch or understand government. But when we had 9/11 come out, you think about it, that's the first time throughout the world people were watching that. Some disagree with me, but that whole day was so remarkable because we didn't know what was happening. We didn't know what was going to happen next. We didn't know who took these actions. We didn't know who was involved. I was literally very nervous.
Didn't know it was going to end.
Yeah, I was very, very nervous and scared, highly anxious about my wife that day going to a pregnancy appointment in Charlotte, where we lived in Gastonia.
Right.
I was like, do we need to go to a big city? You see the panic and the anxiety and
for the unknown.
We don't know. And the more that we have this immediate coverage, without full answers, to create more answers, and you could be critical of whatever news anchor at the time doing whatever they're doing, adding their opinion piece or not. It just creates this cauldron of, you're right, Adam, mental health bombs that go off with people. And people don't act very well when they're fearful or anxious or confused. These are very, very primitive emotional states that we get ready to kill a bear about. I mean, that's what happens. We're ready to kill something or, flee for our lives or freeze and do nothing. That's and you see that with news stories like this. So, yeah, that's pretty well done. I appreciate you bringing it. Is that?
Yeah. I was actually surprised y'all didn't say tank. So,
yeah,
and we won't get into it, but here's the reason why. I figured that the documents are like, I don't want to talk about that anymore. That's the first thing, and
the weariness, yes.
And the other thing about tanks is,
they're cool.
They're
wicked
they are
cool.
But just for the sake of saying the argument here, when I was leaving work today, someone mentioned the tanks, and there's a couple of articles. I won't get into that. Maybe after work, this episode, we'll talk about it. But then while I'm at a restaurant before I came in today for here, I mentioned it to some people there. Tanks.
Really?
That's the thing. I actually, kind of told them what I was doing. Hey, what kind of news articles are kind of bothering you? Can cause stress. Oh, the tanks, man. Tanks bother me.
Really? That's what they came up with?
Totally.
And again, it's sort of a similar thing. I mean, let's get on to the review. But the war and weaponry make people very, very nervous. I've had people that are working in facilities, that are just factories doing the stuff that creates this anxiety within them about what it is that they're working in a factory just making bullets and stuff. Literally.
Right.
That's like a thing. Like this does mess very much inherently with our psyche. So let's get to the first review show, which was, I personally really enjoyed doing, what was it, episode 212, because it was my personal dietitian that I've been working with. And I'll tell you, Miss Cyrilla Purnell, thank you so much for joining our show and talking with us, because I have learned so much more.
Good episode.
I have learned so much more from her and working with her about food and than I ever before. I mean, she's awesome, and it's a wonderful service. That's also kind of new. If you don't know what I'm talking about out there, this is an advocate for. I think I'm becoming an advocate for what the dietary profession is starting really to be able to do, and I talked with her about it. It's new, and I think it's really kind of since COVID kind of began. Like, you have sessions individually with your dietitian who works with you in a nutritional way to kind of help you understand your dietary needs and your body and what happens with this. We know exercise greatly affects mental health. Do you think nutrition does as well? Like, a lot. Adam, how's your food intake for your mental health? Do those Doritos help you?
The cheesesteak helped me mentally today.
The cheesesteak helped you mentally today.
Yes.
They got good stuff. I know what you're talking about. So, Neil, I don't know even how to review that show. I'm going to lean on you heavily because, I've talked to Cyrilla in my own sessions and stuff, so I don't know what we talked about in this show and what we talked about in any one of our sessions. So I'm really kind of at a loss at how to do that one, to be honest with you.
I think you guys, I mean, you start with your basic questions you kind of ask from the show. Do you know what positive nutrition includes? How much does what you eat really affect your mood? And do you get scared or overwhelmed by all the things you hear from the food industry? I think the biggest takeaway I got from the conversation is the reality of how much nutrition does matter. That's the thing you're seeing. You talked about exercise, but a lot of stuff you see now, even when I was in more of a fitness kick, it was like, 90% of your weight loss is in the kitchen, and that's what people don't understand. And I think Cyrilla did a really good job with talking about the effect, being aware of some food affects you one way, other food affects you different. Talked about the short term and long term. You remember her comment on that one where
short term and long term?
Yeah.
Food?
Yep.
No. Yes, I do actually, but I forget the main point.
Short term benefits versus long term benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So because the idea is like, you eat your cheesesteak, and if it's a big piece of bread with some cheesesteak, you might get long term. It might make you full longer during the day. But now, you drink a soda or a coffee. Well, we'll say soda because I like coffee. I'm not going to. I'm not going to talk bad about coffee. But soda, you get that quick pick me up, or that candy bar, quick pick me up. But it's short term gain. And so that was key, that you have to remember that when you're trying to help with your emotions, you might eat that piece of cake to give you that short-term fix, like, oh, I'm happy.
It gives an immediate metabolic response in your body.
So did she go over like keeping your glucose level maintained? Did she go over that?
She didn't go that technical.
How deep? Okay. Yeah, it is so much with nutrition. She just can't get depthy. Which audience, we will have her back, and Neil will have the mic, because I know you got. He got upset with me after the show. He's like, I had so many questions I wanted to ask and I wanted to talk, dude. Like, we have to have Eric back, and I have to do it on the mic. So we will do that, Neil. I promise.
And I think the other thing that she talked about too is our behavior with food. Not even the nutrition about how it affects, but our behavior, how we handle food.
You didn't finish the long term though.
Right. And then the long term is basically something that has more substance to it, your proteins and your fats. So a handful of almonds versus some M&Ms. There's a difference. It'll actually sustain you longer. And so that was key to it, because you have to understand that if you're trying to get through the day and you don't want those spikes, you do something that has a longer term effect. You eat something with the proteins and the fats. A couple eggs in the morning with toast is going to be better than a sugary bowl of Captain Crunch.
And I loved that, Neil, because with my perspective in therapy, listen, I haven't gotten too loud about it, but I am, dare I say, a long-term therapy advocate. And I haven't really railed a lot on that, just because I don't want to step on people's toes and, piss people off. But to a certain extent, I say that because we have a lot of mentality sometimes where I want to identify the problem. We used to talk about short-term solutions-focused therapy, and that just misses so much because of short-term employee assistance program. It's designed for like 3-4 sessions. It honestly misses so much of what happens along the whole life cycle of a person. And so when you're in a long-term therapy relationship, I have had experiences many times over that I know you in therapy for, honestly, guys, it might be a year. And maybe we're only meeting every other week or even once a month, but sometimes every week. And I find brand new big time things like sexual abuse come out that long. So the long-term impact of your nutrition is huge in almost interestingly very correlated ways.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to nutritionists, they almost become therapists, food therapists, because there's a lot of people what they eat.
Food therapist, I love that term.
It is really, yeah.
I do.
Yeah,
I like that.
Because you think about it. When you're in a bad mood, what do you eat? You eat your Doritos and your Snickers, your cheesesteaks and beer. You eat those things when you're in a bad mood.
Get
When
my
you're
pizza rolls, baby.
when you're happier, you're like, oh, I'll have a salad because I need to eat healthy. It's like, so when it comes to the food and the emotions that come with it, they're heavily connected.
You're making me think of, like, you're right with depression specifically, right? Like, your body metabolically craves energy, and so you suck in the carbs. And this is why sugars are really impactful, because it gives your body the hit that depression has depleted. And you have to guard against that. Oh my gosh, there's so much that we can go into with that. But yeah, it's an awesome review on just that part of it.
So you're gonna have her back?
Definitely got to have that girl back.
I'd like to hear about differences in ages.
Did we talk about differences in ages?
Because one thing, I'm gonna say it wrong.
I think we did actually. No, I know we did. Well, see, this is where I can't tell if we've done it in session or if we did it on the show.
You said something about, oh God, how can I say this? You said, I can't remember exactly what it was. You said something about something she had said.
It may have been.
About the cutting back on the amount you eat or something like that.
That's it. That's where I was
going.
So
there was, I'd read something somewhere about after 40, that's like even more important.
Oh, yeah. Your body literally needs, and I forget numbers kind of, but like 40% less calories. I think it's after 50, you need like 40% less calories or something like that. Listen, if you're listening to this review, you need to understand, go listen to that show with Cyrilla, because the depths of her knowledge and the detail is even hard for me to really review, because there was so much specific that she got really on, and she knows her stuff.
And what episode was that?
214.
214.
12.
212.
212.
214.
I don't know. That was last show.
But that's why we were talking about that earlier.
I think the other thing that's interesting about Cyrilla was the fact that she eats everything, which is weird. Like, she has no, she says she doesn't like anything. And I was like, how do you not like something? Like,
yeah, it's really weird. All food.
I can't understand that. But I think food in today's society is so much different than it was like 60 years ago. Like with the processed foods, with the availability of food, like
all the added sugar and salt,
all the added stuff.
Yes.
Like, we watched some short video today, my wife and I, like Simply Orange, there's supposedly some lawsuit because there's some chemical in it that causes cancer because it's created by Coke. I'm like, so like, it's just not, food nowadays is no longer a necessity. It's a luxury. And how we treat it is so much different than we used to, because there is so much, like, there's all these food shows about how to cook things or what's there, or all these restaurants. And it's just
it's overwhelming.
It is.
And I love that you reminded us of her, mentality with that, because I can tell you she isn't really into the diets of exclusion and specific weights and all that kind of stuff. And maybe that's just with me, but I think in general she kind of explains that it's about getting a wealth of micronutrients, a wealth of variety, a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, so that you get the the molecular structures back in line and balance, because we get so much of one or so much of the other, so heavily loaded on just carbs. It's carbs, and so yeah, it's not like very confusing.
So you're
to
saying
figure it out
she was
with her.
saying she was like pushing variety. Okay.
Lots of connections, and oh, and I remember something that was cool too. And we got to get off and review the other shows too. What was it she was talking about that it was specifically, certainly in the show, because I remembered I wanted to talk to her about it again. She was talking about the stomach. Like, I know we make oh man, I'm not pulling it back.
I think you're talking about like the probiotics and the fact that your gut health dictates so much of your body, and that's like that's a big thing nowadays, because they have found out that like if you have bad digestion, it can really cause a lot of issues on the rest of your body. Not only you're not getting proper nutrition, but just the sheer mental health aspect of the chemicals that get produced are just so crazy. You know, a lot of those.
But I feel she was talking specifically, like, not about neurotransmitters, because I've known that we produce neurotransmitters and they get shot directly up to the brain to be used from the gut. Maybe that's what it was, but it was something specifically about a pretty impactful thing on your mental health. Does that ring a bell?
Sounds like you get to bring her back.
Yeah, indeed.
Or you need to go watch episode 212. Listen to episode 212. Go watch it on YouTube. Get us some views.
Yeah, I am going to check. I am going to check
212.
that
That
out.
is 212.
I am going to
Yeah.
check that again. All right, well, let's move on to the episode 213. What is your perspective?
I like that show.
It's a heck of a. I mean, it came out right around New Year's being out and all. Didn't really plan that. It did a little bit, but the three questions really: what is your perspective? Where and do you know when it was developed? So, like, when and where, and then a big question I really wanted to kind of highlight a lot is: do we have domain over our perspective? And short answer, like, yes. I want to just pop you if you wonder, right? Like, you do. But I hear these questions a lot of times, or these statements like, you just feel the way that you feel, and I can't do anything about that. Or the phrase we all love, it is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which you hate.
I can't stand that phrase. Yeah, you know that. It's terrible, So I don't know. Those are my highlights, Neil. But what do you see or recall, and Adam, from the episode 213 perspective? All about what is your perspective?
I'd like to hear Adam's perspective.
I like the discussion about, and I'm gonna use the wrong term, not homestead, but you're going to do a discussion about whether it's like genetic or where you were
Nature
raised.
versus nurture.
John really did a lot with that, actually.
And from what I got, the general consensus with Chris, maybe pushing a little bit toward the other way, was that had to do with how you were like brought up.
Your nurture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you agreed, but I think you also wanted to emphasize that a lot of it's just built into us.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
I think
how you
so.
felt? Okay.
I think you're feeling that right. Victoria, would you agree, Neil? I mean, Victoria and John were kind of leaning really very clearly to the social aspect, right?
Yeah, I think social aspect was a big part of this one, whether it's your upbringing or your friends. And I think, the way I see it is that your genetics is how you're going to that's kind of your initial perspective, is how you're genetically like dispositioned to be like, oh, this is how I view it, or this is how I relate. But I think it's that nurture that either amplifies your genetics because you're enforcing something, or it's going to go take you a different direction because you're learning like that might not be a healthy perspective. So I think I kind of lean towards nurture just a little bit above nature, because nurture can shift your perspective a lot better than your genetics can.
Well, when we talked about Adlerian psychology as a particular view or orientation in the mental health field, and they really, we talk about there being a stew. There's just such a conglomerate combination. I've said this before several times on the show. You've got what I call a tale of two tapes. It's an overview of mental health. So
You actually talked about that during that show.
Did I?
Yeah.
Did I during that show? Yeah, I do all the time because
actually you said I call it, and she said a tale of two tapes. You said,
yeah. On the one side, you got the biological components, genetics, nutrition. We just talked about right in our review, and the exercise and the just the sleep and the hygiene. Right, so our body drives the way we feel, but then you have social and emotional components, life experiences, life's relationships, and the daily stress and the grind. And I think generally in the mental health field, I could be wrong, but I find people really lean towards the part that we work with. I don't know if there's a bias there or if it's just sort of a lot of the therapeutic perspectives.
You mean like
kind of
what clicks with them? Is that what you mean?
We orientate towards the nurture.
Okay.
Because that's what we're working with. I think we don't work as much with what Cyrilla works with, the nutrition, or what your doctor works with, the medical, what a psychiatrist works with prescriptions of medications, changing the biological. But so I think I was slanting a little bit that way to pull us back into like, really they're both super important in developing the perspective that you have. You can't lean just at one or the other. I think we now.
I think you get
now
that
know
point across. I think you get the point across when you were
good.
The way you're saying.
Yeah, I hope so. Because I think that's important for young therapists out there too. For all of us. I mean it. So what else did we go through, Neil? What do you got in your mind that sticks out from episode 213? What is your perspective? He coughs.
I can say I did like that Victoria mentioned about where you're born and what religion you may be.
Actually, no, that was John. He talked about the world culture.
I thought she mentioned it first. I could be wrong, but I thought she mentioned it first, and he agreed.
So we got to give Victoria credit.
I think we need to give Victoria credit on this one. John has so much of that we'll give this one to Victoria.
Yeah, because I was thinking the whole time that it would be avoided. That part of the conversation would be avoided. I was glad to hear that it was agreed that, depending on where you're born, you may be a different religion or whatever. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Surprised me.
I wanted to see, Neil, with your observation of that show, there was that provocative question, I feel like, that was pretty provocative. And Adam, what do you hear from this? Does your view drive our behavior, or does your behavior drive our view? And I was trying to remember what they said about it. We didn't get to spend a lot of time on that. Do you remember how we laid that out, and what do we think about that?
I think your view drives your behavior.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards that one because I feel like how you perceive something dictates how you act. And that's why sometimes you listen to people talk and they're like, I deal with that with people I know, where they basically something will happen. They're like, oh, did you see what that person did? Blah, blah, blah. They did that. Blah. And then they like their behavior, like their reaction just so like animated. I'm like, I didn't notice that. Maybe they just squinted at the sun.
Their thing.
But so to me, that what you're viewing and how you perceive something in your perspective, I think heavily dictates how your behavior is. One of the things when I worked corporate, they had a thing where it's like assume positive intent when you're dealing with conversation with people, because there's that whole issue where when you work with other people in corporations, there's a lot of animosity sometimes that builds up. And so just the way you view that email that came in changes how you respond to it, because are you thinking they're trying to fix a
attacking
situation?
you or just
right,
or just informing you or something like that? Yeah,
it's interesting to hear you guys kind of go back and forth with that a little bit, because it's funny to me because there's a whole method of thinking in mental health about behavioral. You hear cognitive behavioral therapy, right? CBT. Well, there's also just behavioral therapy, where you're really looking at your behavior. What is your behavior? And all behavior has a purpose. So what, in understanding your purpose, is your behavior is going in it. So it acts as a window. So honestly, a pure behaviorist would say completely opposite what I think you guys are talking about, right? They would maybe say, like, you change your behavior to create the whole direction of what you're thinking and what you're feeling.
I can see that, but
Right.
from what and correct me if you disagree, but I think the drive has to come from what, like we're saying. Changing your behavior can make you, start acting a different way or whatever. I understand that, but you got to have that drive.
Yeah.
Like my thing is, I'm a worker, and one thing that really irritates me is people who don't work.
I know you are.
So the drive for my irritation, what triggers my irritation is I'm a worker, and when I see somebody not doing it
To your level.
to any acceptable
To
level,
an
it's just,
acceptable level.
yeah, it's just
But wouldn't that be your behaviors dictating your view? Because your behavior is to work. When you see someone not working, your behavior is dictating how you're perceiving them.
Right. Right.
Because if your behavior is I want everyone to be a worker, and you're watching them and they're not working like you think they should work based on your thought process of working, doesn't that dictate how you then view what they're doing? You're not doing that efficiently enough. You're not getting things done like I'm supposed to. Then you start getting irritated.
And
Yeah.
I think it's funny because when we did this on a show, if I remember kind of correctly, I think the panel we were kind of like, oh, well, I mean, it's CBT, right? As a matter of fact, I remember Victoria kind of saying something along those lines, like, well, we have cognition, we have behavior, and you deal with both, so it's both. Like, what are we talking about here? But it's a question that makes you think, and I think we moved on to a lot of the other things that I don't know. Frankly, we might
this
have been
chicken
a
or
little more
egg
interested
thing
in.
conversation.
Well, it's the chicken and the egg. It's we have to create a new expression because I mean I will sometimes work directly in my therapy office. Like I see the thoughts that you're having; they're loud and you're repetitive and they're chronic, and we need to really look at how do we reframe those. Or I see your behavior is loud and your behavior is really creating some troubles for you or is really working for you and we want to build on that, right? Like, so I totally go both ways as the situation and the person present. So, Neil, is there anything else that was sort of big in there that was good highlights? Oh, the yes, of course, we have domain, right?
I think the apply directly focused and purposeful strategies for the barriers, I think that is key because I think when you're trying to adjust your behaviors based on your views or how you view something because of your behavior, there has to be an intentionality in how you shift it. When you see those bad behaviors or you see in this note barriers, you have to shift your behaviors, which then could require you to change your perspective on the matter. You know,
I think the review is fun because do you remember what the barriers were?
No.
Oh, that's awesome. And it tests my brain too because sometimes, I do prep and this is less prep for it. So it's interesting.
I heard this episode and I don't remember.
The audience can like pop me questions and catch me. But in this one I got this was huge, right? Because I loved the way that we were talking about how to overcome the barriers just after New Year's when everyone's made their resolutions and bam, they're failing, they're feeling, and here's the barriers. Like, I suck, negative criticisms, doubt, and the shame. I mean, these types of things pop into our realm and our own critical self-thinking, and it destroys being on track with what it is that you would love to have for yourself. In the new year, new me mentality, you get destroyed, and the barriers just act as just that, barriers.
And I think one thing that got brought up is, and maybe this was part of another show about the New Year's, but it's your perspective on whether you're meeting those goals or not that can dictate your views of it. Like, I worked out some, but I didn't lose those 5 pounds I wanted to lose. But yet you're still working out, you're getting healthy. So that's that perspective you have of success or failure.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give more credit to Victoria.
Oh wow, Victoria's getting props this week.
She did excellent job. She made a statement about you have a opportunity to always. I wish I could know the exact term she said, but y'all were
smart cookie.
Y'all were talking about the New Year's resolution stuff about making your life better, and then she mentioned about where you always have an opportunity to take a step. Even if you fail, you have the. I wish I could remember exactly how she said it. It was.
You can get back on
She
track.
said it very eloquently.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I don't know how she said it either, but it really is. I mean, that's the whole idea between the barriers, because it's so sad and frustrating and completely unnecessary that we allow these things to just impede our progress. And she was just really very validating and very supportive and encouraging for all of us that are trying to do something new and different, to just, not go off the whole plan. If you have a problem pop up, you just get back on the next day and allow yourself the grace, right? Like, allow yourself the self-forgiveness. And John kind of piled in with that because he's wonderful that way kind of as well, to not pound yourself into oblivion, and then you're doomed anyway. You just don't get back to it.
Which kind of goes back to Cyrilla too in the food, because that was one thing she talked about, was the food guilt and that stuff. So it's kind of a common theme that
it was,
when you don't hit those milestones or you have those issues, you have to move past them. And so it's it's kind of that common theme between both of these pieces.
I agree, right? And yeah, I agree that we were putting on both of that, because I know, listen, diets kill people's mentality. And if you're doing a New Year's diet,
only for the first 2 weeks of each year.
I know. Exactly right. If it's killing you and it's beating your head apart with your emotions and self-esteem, stop doing that to ourselves. And we do that in diets. It's horrible. And this is not just a woman thing, by the way. Women, if you're listening to this, understand that men do this to ourselves as well. We're not too tough and whatever. We want to let people know. But, I mean, we definitely do that. So give yourself a break. Cut yourself some slack.
And every day you have an opportunity to make things better.
It's really true. It's really true. I don't know if I'm cutting these other too short, but I want to make sure that we get to episode 214, man. Audience listening, Adam ruined it. He's all dialed in and knows what I did to these people.
No, I'm not. I'm really not.
So I'm still going to give you the question, Adam, and it'll be a review for you because it's been probably a minute. And one of the most poignant questions was posed to me in therapy, and I don't know how much you remember, Adam, but we were talking about friendship as the real quick short of it, and Friendship Network, and you can get more of the descriptions listening to 214, but we switched over to talk about, giving and being kind to others, and how it's very clear that when you give to another person, you get way more back than what you gave.
And you were talking about people that you don't necessarily
even
know
people
that
you
well.
don't know. And this lady just stopped when we were in a session. She says, okay. And you feel great about that. It's like almost an emotional fact. She said, okay, Chris, well, why doesn't that happen in marriage? And I'm telling you, man, I stopped in the middle of the session, and I told her, I was like, because she knows I do the show, and I think she knows the line. And I was like, listen, this is something that we're going to have to figure out together, because I really was like, wow, because you know where we go on our closer relationships, and we experience the same thing with our parenting relationships. Why doesn't this work in our parenting relationships? That you give so much to your family members that you just don't get that back. You feel like. So, Adam, what did that do in your thinking process as you hear this, either in reviewing it or heard it then?
Well, the thing that I thought about is when you said it in your podcast, and you said you don't get that like in marriage or relationships. I don't think it's necessarily true. I think that at some point people get less of it, but at the same time you need to be trying to do those things to make that person have a better day.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then I think something's wrong.
Sure.
So, I mean, I see the point. It may fade away. I mean, I was married for 20 years. I know it fades away.
It fades away, right?
But other things happen. Things happen. Things fade away. But if you're not trying to make the effort to make that other person's life better, or make them, feel better, or do something, then I mean, I don't know. I just think that you're supposed to do that, and by doing that, I think you should feel good about it.
Then why don't we? And
I do.
Is her question. Well, I think an overwhelming majority of the time, people really feel as though a sense of frustration about, I do more to manage this family than you do. I feel like I'm not getting the deal back on what keyword John talked about, expect. The sense that my wife just loves pushing my buttons, or it's almost like he purposely wants to mess with me. I mean, you
Right.
hear these phrases, you hear these statements. I see this like all the time. And I know I'm in a therapy office maybe where marriages are struggling, but I think it's a pretty broad stroke understanding that with your parenting, you don't get back what you give to your kids. Why doesn't this work? Because you're giving. You're supposed to feel so great about giving, and we do, but yet we're not experiencing this. So I understand what you're saying, Adam. I don't think there's an extreme with it, but what do you take, Neil, from what Adam's kind of saying that I do?
I think with this, it goes back to what you said. Is that giving, continuous giving without something back. You talk about altruism and the whole idea of, only doing things for the right intentions. And I think when you're in a relationship, or especially when you get kids involved, it is such a draining, continuous giving. Up until a certain point, your kids can't do anything, and it's just about you giving. If you're in a relationship where it's just you giving, you don't really get a reward back. Because when you go up to a homeless person and give them $20, they appreciate it, and they might even say that they appreciate it, and it's going to benefit them. But when you go and you make food for your wife or something for your kid, and then they're like, "Oh, this is disgusting." Like, there's a difference in the reality of it, and
yeah.
So
my kids know they go to their friend's house and eat. Food tastes so much better at somebody else's house than it ever tastes in our house.
But that's where I think the thing is it's that continuous giving without some sort of a thing back. And I know altruistically you're supposed to.
In my mind, it's the knowing this appreciated.
Right. Acknowledging that appreciation. And like, I love doing things for my wife and making her happy. But then I get to that point where there was comments like, you want to spoil your wife, but then you're mad that she's spoiled, kind of. I've seen that somewhere, and I'm like, yeah, it makes sense, because she's asking me to do something, we're getting in bed. She's like, can you go get me water? Like, I don't want to, but okay, fine, whatever. So there is that. But
Can't say hell no.
You could, but then
it's not going to work out well for you.
So,
but even see the way I've just stumbled into that. It's not going to work out that way well for you if you say no. So yes, I'll go get you water. Now listen, I understand that we have kindness that we have in relationships, and in healthy relationships we go back and forth. But I really realize, and I think I landed on a good spot that seems accurate, that we are not nearly at coming from a selfless perspective or a helping mindset as much as we typically think that we do. Because Victoria and I went back and forth a little bit, agreeing. Like, she's like, I think I'm selfish. I know that I am. And I was like, I get that too. If you were to ask me if I am selfish in my marriage, I'm like, I have no doubts about that. Of course, I have many flaws and lots of selfishness that is a part of me. It's unfortunate. It's a part of being human. But I never really saw it from this like different angle of like truly how much that may be really relevant. And it's a tough pill to swallow. I don't like chewing on the idea that I may be as selfish and not helpful when I'm thinking about my kids. I mean, I feel like I bleed out for my kids and want to do, I want their life to be amazing. I want everything for them. I want them to have way easier time in life than I ever had in any regard.
So how's that selfish, though? I'm not seeing the correlation.
It's because we get into these spaces and we move to talk about these disguises. Like, we have to consider, if we're not feeling all of that powerful giving resulting in exponentially more positive, that it might be coming from different perspectives. And it's even easier to talk about it in our marriage. It's tough to talk about it, honestly, in our kids. But I want quiet house. I want you to learn life lessons. I want you to make good decisions. Well, why do I really want my kids to make good decisions? Let's just stay there for a second. I've said this to them, both of them know many hundreds of times. I think I say that to them because I want them to learn how to discern good problem-solving skills and decision-making. Or is it also really, to a large extent, because my life's going to be really a lot easier if I don't get that freaking phone call from the principal's office, or you have the financial fail of the credit card that I have co-signed for, or I have, or, right? I'd like to think it's just purely I want to guide them and help them. But I think if we look at it from a different angle, we really have to consider like the other side of that we don't like to think about quite so much.
Okay.
Yeah,
I got you.
It's crazy, right? I think if you ask 1,000 couples, are you more helpful to your spouse than not coming at it from a helpful mindset? 95% are going to be like, oh, I am definitely more helpful. I do more. I am more helpful than any kind of hindrance or having it be about me. But in disguise, and we listed them, I don't know if we have time to list them all here today, but like in disguise, we have things that are really about us. They're about our own perspective, our own fear, our own insecurity. Just stay there for a second, Adam. Like, I look at abandonment and engulfment intently in the cycles of a marriage. When you're operating, how much of your behavior is operating out of one or two of those things? And that has nothing to do with the other person. A lot of your behavior has to do with me, my own feelings, my own insecurities. It drives me if I want to be close and pursue, right? And talk, connect, discuss ad nauseum. It's what the other person sometimes feels like. That's about my insecurities with abandonment. Or I just don't want to bother you. I don't want to upset you. I just want to have some distance. I think we need some time. Let's just get away from this argument. We'll shut it down. We'll put up some walls. And that's the engulfment side of it. That's not about it's better for us to not talk about this. That's about the engulfment insecurities. I could go on and on. I don't know.
I think it's more about how you deal with things. But okay.
Sure. But how you deal with things is from a selfless perspective or a selfish perspective. It's kind of one or the other a little bit.
I think in relationships there is a shift as the relationship grows. I think actually it's kind of funny now I'm thinking about it. Sometimes when a relationship first starts, it's almost very selfish because you're doing things to them to keep them happy to then try to win them over. And then it shifts. You build that relationship, you care, and then it becomes more selfless because you care about that person. You want them happy.
Right.
And then as it grows, it's like, it's my duty. I have to do this, and to make my life easier, I'll do it for them. It's like I'll go pick up the kids this time, or I'll do this, or I'll do that, and it's just so I feel like there's this ebb and flow in a relationship of a selfishness to win the person, get what you want, a selflessness as you care about them and it's fresh and new, and there is a genuine like I want them to be happy and I'm doing this for them, not for anything I get. And then you get back to that point where it's like you start getting to like the contempt and the other stuff where it starts. Right. And so that's kind of how I see a relationship, as an ebb and flow. And then your kids leave and then you go back to being happy with your wife and you're selfless. And then
John talked about that different stage when you empty nest and how they weren't able to tend to each other's needs. And that different stage is so much better or easier, evidently.
Easier.
The easier. Victoria talked about her stage as a 9-month-old baby, and how she just feels all amazing in return. So you're right, Neil. It's the ebb and flows. And I'll tell you what, when you hit a pretty rocky ebb in all of that ebb and flow at a particular stage of life, whichever it might be, we know that marriage tends to struggle in the toddler years and in the teenage years. That's well-researched, well-known, well-studied. It's like very much replicated. And because there's things going on. And it becomes so much stress, and it becomes about ourselves. I'm remembering this now, and so I want to throw this in because I didn't get to do this a whole lot when we were there because we got into a really, I think... Neil, what do you think? Do you think that was one of our better shows? I really feel like it was. But I don't know if I'm just enamored with all of the thought that I've had about it, honestly.
I mean, I really just enjoy the panel. I feel like every show there's so much information in it, so I wouldn't say that this was better than any of the
You
other ones.
can't
But
say
it's
that
just,
sounds like a promo.
But you sounded really moved by it when you first talking about it. I mean, you were like really passionate about the show at the very beginning. I tell.
I really was, and I am now. I mean, because it just struck me as being so poignant when she asked me that. I just didn't see it coming, and it was just like, wow, I see this all the time with people, and I didn't really put it from that angle. So,
and I think that's the interesting thing about that question is we all do it, but no one asks that question. And so I think that's what kind of hit so hard about it was like,
right.
Oh, wait. Yeah. I think we are more selfish, or that is why this happens. And I think it's that unspoken thought that we all have in our relationships, whether it's, your significant other, your parents, your kids, there's always this thing. But yet to have someone actually ask that question and make you think about it, like think about yourself. I think that's what made the question so powerful is like, it's that unspoken thing that just no one asks, but everyone thinks.
So, Chris.
Yes.
If you do something for someone you care about to make them feel good.
Yes.
But you do it, and really you do it to make you feel good because you're making them feel good. Are you selfish for that?
You know what that's called?
Codependency.
There you go, Neil. He nailed it. I was so on to like what that is. It's codependency. He nailed it first too. What was the last statement you meant?
No,
are you being?
Are you selfish for doing that to make you feel better?
100%.
Even though you're doing...
It's a self-absorbed state of mind. It's a self-absorbed perspective.
Everybody does everything they do. Everybody's selfish.
That's the great question
whether they
about
really
altruism.
admit it. You
Right.
do anything you do for yourself.
Or if you realize it to the depths. Because
but I don't think most people don't realize it. You do the things that you do the things that make you feel good, and that those things might be things that make other people feel good.
Well, and think about it. The things that make us...
you making them feel good makes you feel good.
Right. And the things that make us feel good sometimes soothe our insecurities. It doesn't have anything to do with like, a better situation or creating a better, healthier environment. It has everything to do with like, I just can't cope real well. So that's why I'm going to behave in this way. And it ultimately is about us. You got thoughts.
I lost my thought. You distracted me with the roadmap you went down. I was like, I don't know what I was going to say.
Well, let me go back to what I remembered because I'm remembering it now again. I actually offered an apology in the show to my wife, and I did that. I told her I was going to do it, but I did that because 90% because I meant it, and I was like, wow, I want her to realize that, and I think that's important. But a percentage also is, and we didn't even talk about this, Neil, because we got into like the list of like how do you manage selflessness and that type of a thing, and it was like one of the most amazing, and I think it was first on my list. Remember we talked about self-care. Victoria nailed it, and I had to go back and put that on the list kind of as well. Was simply recognizing this reality as much as you can, and I submit there's a whole lot more to recognize than what you probably do at this point. And apologizing for that is a huge component of how do we actually become selfless. Like, you almost can't become selfless if you don't realize how selfish we are. That's a quote, I think. Is that a quotable quote? You almost can't become selfless if you don't realize how selfish you actually are.
I think Eminem could probably say it better.
Eminem could probably say it better.
Yeah.
Which one? Peanut Crunchy? Like which Eminem?
I think he was talking about an artist.
He knew. Yeah.
He knew. Are you sure he knew?
I'm sure.
Are you sure he knew?
Yeah, I feel sure he knew.
But that's anyway. Okay, so what else do we summarize up from there? Yeah. I know we talked about a lot of the factors and listed down a little bit about what does it actually look like to be selfless. Compassion, altruism, offering compliments and encouragement. You know, these are things that we really want to get into as part of what pops off in my memory of the list. But Neil, I guess you said they're all really informative and all. I kind of feel like John and Victoria were both very much like in that moment with me. I mean, John was like, this is sad. It's kind of sad. And Victoria was like, I know. It's like, wait a minute. What are we identifying here? How much is this really the case? I think that's why it kind of hit me.
I think you also built it up a lot too, which kind of made them like really think about it, because you were like this poignant question, and it really struck me. And then I think that led Victoria and John to also think really deep with it, because it is, like I said, it is actually a really deep question when you think about your relationships and what's going on, and then what does that mean for you? You know, human nature, people don't want to be called selfish.
No.
Like, it's like you want to think like, oh, I'm doing this because I love them and I'm selfless, but then reality is like, well, no, I just don't want to get nagged at, or I don't want to do this. And so I think that's very hard.
Is selfish for doing it for that, but
I mean, in your marriage, did you get to the point where you just did things just because you didn't want to deal with your ex-wife? You don't have to answer if there's
no. I'm trying to think.
I know you're a worker, so you just want to get things done, but the reality.
So you're saying do things for her just because I had to, or what are you saying exactly?
Do things for her just so you didn't have to deal with her.
Or the emotion that would come if you didn't. Or the problems that it would occur, or the long conversation that might come. Or
just the conversation that might come just because there'd be just a conversation.
Yeah, a long one.
Because you don't want to talk to it.
Right!
At all.
Do you see where his point is? Yeah. And
I don't see that being selfish, though. That's like self-preservation.
Oh!
I think
Neil's eyes just went wide.
Selfishness is like the key to self-preservation. Like, that's why, because it's all about you. Because it's not about preserving the relationship. It's about preserving yourself in the relationship to keep yourself alive to then live another day.
Oh, but if we would talk, it's probably a good thing because it's probably kept her alive too.
Indeed.
So,
indeed. And I tell you, this goes on in so many little intricate mannerisms and ways that we interact. And, John said something that kind of hit hard, I think, where he's like, it's part of the sadness that he had is it's almost like, your true intent, thus the core essence. How did he say it, Neil? It was really like awesome. Of who you are, the essence of who you are and your true intent is ironically better known by people outside of your more intimate circles. Yeah. And I was like, wow, John, like, that's deep. And I think probably in some ways really accurate. And this is even tougher to think about with your kids, man. Like I said a little bit ago, like, I do not like chewing on this one with being a dad. I mean, it's. I think you're right, Neil. It's kind of the thing that no one ever really wants to think about and I don't think that we really talk about it so directly, and it's something that's so powerfully a part of our regular experience. So I hope that show brought out some stuff to make you think, because if you really do get into a selfless perspective more times than you do now, that is wonderful, because that is a powerfully positively based mental health way to experience life and living. You know, truly humble people. What is it, a phrase that I have in the book? Through a therapist's eyes, re-understanding emotions and becoming your best self. There, I did it, Adam. You like that whole thing?
Mm-hmm.
Humble people are happy people. I
You
love
want
that
a book
title.
to hold up?
Huh?
Want a
No,
book to hold up?
stop it. I love that title, though. Humble people are happy people, right? That's one of the titles of the book, I'm sure, because it's a big deal. It's poignant to me, in particularly from that angle. Closing thoughts, comments. I guess we're moving into February.
I got a busy month next month.
Do you?
I got 2 birthdays and a Valentine's Day next month, so
Ah.
February is a crazy month for me and my household.
And it's a short one.
Yes, it's a
Oh,
lot of stuff
sure.
crammed in one month.
I'm looking forward to my vacation time starting over.
Where are you going?
Oh,
You just
you
get
might
your
not be
time
going
rolled
anywhere.
over?
You just get to count the clock. again.
Repainting the lawnmower?
No, that thing's good now.
It is sweet and humming. I'm sure
looking
it
at
is.
maybe painting the bedroom now.
I'm going for the living room.
My bedroom's needs a lot of work. That's let's see, is it the only room? That's the only room in the house that has not been painted since I bought the house.
Oh, wow.
And it's horrible.
That paint's old, so enjoy. Let me know if I could come over and stroke some strokes with you. I love painting. So you guys have an awesome week. I hope these shows in review of January are going alongside with you to partner with you in 2023 to make this an awesome year. It's good riding with you guys. Take care, and we will see you next week back again with the panel.